Hello everyone, welcome back into another episode of Last Protagonist reacting to a bunch of lore videos. Hope you're doing well. So, on yesterday's stream, we checked out Dark Souls 2 is actually good, Nihilism Just Scares You by KRZ. Then A Human Just a Cars, Bale and the Fate of the Dragons, Elden Ring Lore and Theory. Then we followed that up with Amelia Eon's The Lore of the Shamans, The Truth Behind Gold in Elden Ring. And we did not get to tonight's first video, annekkipu, A Mere Suggestion and Solar Eclipse Theory, Elden Ring, annekkipu. Then after that, I have on another one of Zafe's with It Was Them All Along, Solving the Mystery Leads to Farum Azula's Past, Elden Ring Lore Theory. Then following that, we have Storm King's Elden Ring Lore, The Original Sin, Marika Sin. Then Hawkshaw's Romina, The Betrayal, and the Beauty of Rot, Elden Ring DLC Lore. So, pretty good lineup here already. So, want to welcome back in Mr. Yada, I-Man, and Galaxy Dragon. Nice and early. How's it going? So, without further ado, let's go ahead and check out annekkipu's A Mere Suggestion and Solar Eclipse Theory.
Hey guys, quick question. What are those?
I was about to say chonkalas, okay.
They are my Crocs.
Exactly, thank you, Grandma. Sun, flowers. That all happen to face the Skadu tree. Do you think it's because they are actually looking at the tree, or maybe, just maybe, at something that the tree is blocking? As per usual,
I think because of the nature of the thorns on the skidoo tree sunflowers that they probably are more directly related to the skadu tree, but I don't know, to be honest. And then Halo the Sun, nice to see you again.
I was working on another video on the twin bird. By the way, it comes out next week. Please wait for it. And it was getting way...
Please rate my cover art.
By the way, it comes...
That's pretty good. I would definitely give that at least a 7. I feel like I'm pretty bad at thumbnails in general, though. But it's definitely eye-catching, and it's simple enough. This stands out. It's pretty good.
It's out next week. Please wait for it. And it was getting way too long, because my yapping knows no limits, and I get carried away. So I decided to take a part of it and make a separate video that could serve as a good introduction to whatever misinformation I'm gonna spread next week. Where was the Sun Realm? Why did Marika need the eclipse? And what is this gate for? Watch and find out. If you want a quick answer to what inspired the gate, it is most likely Glastonbury Tor, a real place in England topped by St. Michael's Tower, the only surviving part of St. Michael's Church. Here's a curious detail. A famous well situated near the Tor is called the Chalice Well. But in my opinion, simply saying the gate in the game is a part of a ruined church is a bit too boring. The inspiration for the building's function, however, may be hidden in the plain sight. You know how there are these sun clocks everywhere in the lands between?
I think these are actually moon dials because if you look at them from the top-down perspective, they have the different phases of the moon on them. But maybe they're related to the sun after all, but X to doubt.
They had me really confused for a long time, because these lands, as Melina points out in the game's intro, are covered by the fog, and the sun is, well, not visible.
Hold on, what's covered by the fog? The lands are covered by the fog? Okay.
Fog, and the sun is, well, not visible. It is undoubtedly there as we see our shadow move as the day goes by, but it's never visible in the skies. Only rarely we see its faraway rays on the water surface. And because the lands between seemingly have no sun, I saw people speculate that the Sun Realm, mentioned on the
Wait, did you just say the lands between?
no sun,
Yeah, so we can see the sun in the lands between. I think we can see it in the Shadow Realm. I don't remember off the top of my head. I know the topic has come up At the very least, wait, I'm pretty sure you can even see it in a near a limb, at least by the Divine Tower. Although I might be misremembering. I don't have enough of my DLC footage labeled. So let me think. Divine Tower? Oh, no, not Divine Tower. What's it called? Divine Gate? I don't know. I could say that this certainly isn't the sun. Let's see if I have anything else. So that's during the fight. No, I don't think so. So maybe if I just type in Skadu Tree, I'll get it in the background somewhere. Wow, I really don't have enough labeled at all. So that's a no. So it's a little bit inconclusive about the location of the sun, at least in the Shadow Realms, but we can definitely see it in the lands between, especially in a place like Liurnia. Sun Liurn. Found it. And this is over by EG's place, a little bit south of it. So Stella, Elden Enthusiast, welcome back in. You recommend Dragon Communion Church in LB for some sun watching? In lands between? Okay. Halo said, the lands between are said to be surrounded by foggy seas, but not the lands themselves. True. All right, let's go back in. This is not what I need. Here.
I saw people speculate that the Sun Realm, mentioned on the shields of the Gravekeepers, is some other place. Well, I'm here today to argue that the Sun Realm is exactly what the lands between were in its original state. First of all, the Gravekeepers we see are a part of an ancient cultural phenomena of death rituals, when death still...
So Elden Enthusiast says, that's a sad-looking sun? Hey man, I would much rather have a sad-looking sun than an angry boy chasing me a la Super Mario Bros. 3.
Existed in the lands between, the Firekeepers of the graveyards would cremate those who passed away, and their souls would be guided to their final destination by the Tibia Mariners. After America sealed death as a natural process, those rites were no longer in demand, as nobody died a true death. However, after the Night of the Black Knives, those who live in death reappeared throughout the lands between, and the Gravekeepers were...
Yeah, I would disagree with the characterizing them as reappearing, because those who live in death only came to be as a byproduct of Deathroot, which seems to be created from the misshapen remains of Godwyn after the Night of the Black Knife specifically. We do have those lost in death, and for what it's worth, the Tibia Mariners themselves are not actually weak to Litany of Proper Death, although the stupid, what are they called? Gravebirds are, for some reason, which I don't totally fathom.
Among them. Their weapons and shields are what they carried to the grave a long time ago, before the Golden Order even existed. These Gravekeepers exist both in the lands illuminated by the Earth Tree and in the lands that dwell in its shadows. In fact, from the stone tablet at the suppressing column, we learn that these shadow lands actually are the very center of the lands between, the darkened place where the sun feels all the warmer. And then there are these gates. Were they built to commemorate a battle?
Hold on.
And then
she confused the word gate for the plural. Please forgive. Okay.
There are these gates. Were they built to commemorate a battle? Were they once a portal? Or maybe they used to hold something with their arch? Well...
Yeah, I really liked the idea of the gate, as she calls this, being a receptacle for the sap, but then it just doesn't align with the shadow tree at all, and it's like very disappointing. Like maybe when the wind blows the right way, it goes into this archetype thing and you can get its blessing that way. I don't know. Anyway, without horns and Jay Dixon, nice to see you guys again. Welcome back in.
I believe They are a sun gate, or a sun portal, a structure made for astronomical observation of the sun's cycle, positioned in a specific way to be illuminated on a certain calendar day. Perhaps these lands were veiled in shadow exactly on the day the sun graced the semicircular ornament of the gate, and so the now withered sunflowers are still facing the direction where they last witnessed it. A curious detail pointed out by Hawkshaw is the difference in the
Hey, ironic that we're going to be watching his one of his videos later today.
architecture of the gate and the shadow keep. Seemingly belonging to the same architectural complex, these structures actually are different in details. Never on the gate we find the crest of Mesmer's crusade or his mother's one. Now I wonder if these emblems were added later to the castle they gained during the campaign, or was the keep built under Marika's rule? I incline towards the first option, as it is a common practice in the history of the lands between. Okay guys, my delusional ass was recording this video at 4 AM and I completely forgot to elaborate on why I think the right part of the Alliance sigil is connected to Marika and the siege of the Shadow Keep that I believed occurred. In the trailer for the DLC, we see Mesmer's assault on Ballarat, which marked the Erdtree's betrayal of the Hornsent. However, his armies staged at the Shadow Keep seem to have been welcomed there, or at least almost no signs of battle are visible, and considering the circular spiral sign on some parts of the castle's interior, I believe it was originally taken from whoever dwelled there by the alliance of Queen Marika and the Hornsent. I'm saying this mostly because the Hornsent were profound researchers, and whatever they uncovered was definitely useful for Marika in her plan to seal the death that took away her loved ones.
So about the little spirally type thing, for a while I was thinking it could potentially be a braid and meant to symbolize the union between Mesmer's forces and R'Lana's forces because of the braid that R'nala gave R'Lana. But unfortunately, I mean, I'm fine with this being wrong and getting better information later, but unfortunately this doesn't, like, you can't really see this in the retail version of the game. You have to, like, look at the model for Mesmer's eye, but apparently it has the braided, corded thing on his seal of grace. So to me, I had originally thought it was related to Marika. Then I was like, well, I guess the R'Lana thing makes more sense. And if the Shadow Keep was like a Karian type research institute, I thought that'd be really cool lore. But apparently not. It, like, the braid thing seems like it's probably related to Marika after all. And then Iman, welcome back in. Halo thinks those lost in death are souls that were dead after Marika plucked the rune of death out. Those who live in death are living contradictions in the Golden Order, alive in body but not in soul. I think those lost in death probably still predated even Marika stuff because there's so much fixation on death in the history of the lands between that I think that there is probably like multiple ways of dealing with it. Ghost Flame, the Helfen Steeple stuff, guiding the dead to catacombs via like Rosis's lights. It's I don't know.
The emblem also eerily reminds me of the golden braid we can find in the shaman village, but it seems to have fallen from its circular position, perhaps indicating Marika's intention to betray her sworn comrades, with whom they stood against the ancient civilization that remembered their starfall past and worshipped the furnace, the civilization.
Alright, so there's something on the screen I wanted to read a moment ago. Where was it? Marika was keeping track of the sun movements herself, old habits, or was she preparing for some ritual? And this is taken from a Reddit post by Citizen Sheep. Is this a real life location? I can't read this. The ultimate sundial. If this was a sundial, then is this supposed to be part of it? I don't know. Hey, Zionis, nice to see you again. You still think the Greater Will is the only god that gives true death? Maybe.
With whom they stood against the ancient civilization that remembered their starful past and worshipped the furnace, the civilization that built the gates to commemorate a certain day of the sun's cycle. But their sun was forever sealed. So,
damn it. This stuff is going by a little bit.
The sun's cycle. But their sun.
Petroglyph of the total solar eclipse in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. With its face hidden, the sun becomes eclipsed.
Sun was forever sealed. So, what exactly happened? Please take a look at Exhibit A, America's emblem. It's a golden
I appreciate the usage of allegedly there.
braid in a shape of a circle. Now Exhibit B, Solar Eclipse. The storied sword of Castle Sol depicts an eclipsed sun drained of color. Its skill description says, "Let the lustrous sun ablaze with the Prince of Death's flames." If the shining sun symbolizes the natural order of life, the eclipse is the symbol of America's order, where there is no real death. Surrender yourself to the eclipse. Grant life to the soulless bones, says the spirit. In the time of Queen America's rule, nobody truly died, but returned to the world through the Earth Tree. Another spirit.
I think this is an interesting idea, but then if America's order is that of the eclipse, then why would Mikola also try to eclipse the sun? Is this a Super Trooper situation where the reason why Mikola failed to eclipse the sun is because it's already been eclipsed and it can't be eclipsed any further? Or does that just kind of not really work in this paradigm here?
Asks for Mikola's forgiveness. The sun has not been swallowed. Your comrade remains soulless. After the night of the dire plot, a part of the rune of death was stolen to murder a demigod. However, Mikola tried to help his brother. Godwin did not die, nor was he reborn through America's Earth Tree. An artificial lamplight illuminating the lands covered in fog. To sum it up, in my opinion, the lands between and its original state were the Sun Realm. There are many hints that the ancient astrologers were aware of the sun's movements. The suppressing column in the very center of the lands between was most likely a gnomon, the part of a sundial that casts a shadow. In the real cultures of our world, it could have been an obelisk or a column as well. Hey guys, it's editing me here again, and now that I thought about it, I kind of think that the gates could have been sort of like a solar clock too, if only they had a gnomon in the middle, which could it have been the tree, or maybe it's just my fantasy, I don't know, what do y'all think? Also, I find it funny, gnomon and Newman, yeah, bye. The gates were built for some solar celebration by the civilization that worshipped the furnace, and that explains the flame symbolism, and perhaps...
When she says worship the furnace, I think she might be meaning worshipped the crucible. I was wondering about that earlier, but thinking about it in this context, that kind of makes more sense to me. Elden Enthusiast said it's weird that Mikola has eclipse eyes that open during the boss fight, so it counts. Hold on, let's look at Mikola's eyes. Yeah, I guess I could see how that would look like an eclipse eye. That should be big enough for you guys, I think. Yeah. It's weird. I could write that. Halo says, it's interesting that flames seem to be associated with death, specifically golden flames. Yeah, I am really curious, like, what was going on with Godwin and the son before he was killed by Ronnie. But yeah, I guess I'll just leave that there for now.
The reason America detested it. When Queen America sealed the destined death and established the Golden Order, she veiled the lands in fog, making her Earth Tree the sole source of golden grace. This event became known as the eclipse. Ronnie and Rykard, children of the Lunar Queen, sabotaged America's order, and so the Golden Scion became the Prince of Death.
Okay, so I think with her framing things that way, I could see that Miquella trying to create a Halig tree could be its own type of eclipse-style event. So I think there's less of a textual contradiction if that's kind of her interpretation there.
The wizened shadow sunflower is forever frozen, gazing at the direction where it last saw the sun. Meanwhile, at the other side of the veil, the tarnished sunflower still adores the Earth Tree as if it ever gave it the true guidance of grace. Thank you for watching today's video, guys. I'm glad I could reorganize my thoughts, and I hope some of these ideas could resonate with you. Let me know what your thoughts are. And please await my new video about the twin bird next week. For now, I must say goodbye, but I hope to see you again in my next video.
Oh, you want to subscribe. You want to subscribe so badly. Okay, that was a fun little video. I went ahead and liked it. I'll go ahead and share it with you guys in chat if you want to give her some support. Halo says, oh, it's over already? I know. Well, I tend to try to watch a little bit longer videos to help pad out the time, and so that way I don't have to credit so many individual videos when I make these streams. But yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and then check out Zaif the Scholar's short video with
One of the most
Finding the Killer. It was them all along. Solving the mystery leads to Farum Azula's past. Elden Ring lore theory.
distinctive and prominent features of the Shadow
Sorry, that's probably a lot louder than the last video. The butler did it? Did it with what?
of the Earth Tree's map
Okay, that still looks a little bit loud.
isn't a building or natural land formation, but rather something that was once very much alive. This
The candlestick? I would have believed it if it was the candle tree. Candlestick in the dining room? I would have gone with the candle tree in the manse.
colossal dragon corpse located near the jagged peak. This corpse is so big, in fact, that it's visible at multiple points from way off in the distance as you traverse through the Land of Shadow. And since we find this corpse at the birthplace of Dragon Communion, the practice of slaying dragons and consuming their hearts in order to gain strength, it shouldn't come as a surprise that its thoracic cavity has been opened up, and most of its contents removed and presumably eaten. And considering
Oh yeah, Mike Bailey. Welcome back in. You just reminded me I didn't prepare my bingo card. Alright, so let's see what we got so far. I need to open this in Paint. I always forget. I say always forget like I've done this multiple times. It's just, anyway. Alright, so what did we get with that last video? It's spray. So I think Crucible should count. She did not really talk about Miquella. Archaeology? Yep, we definitely had that with the church thingy. Eyes, not from the video itself, I don't believe. Gek? Nope. Norse Kagari? Nope. Otter Gods? No. Previous games? No. America is? No. Did we have color theory? Kind of a little bit, but not really. I'll say no for now. Did we have a little bit of a Rorschach there? I'm trying to remember. No, but we did have World Tree in a way. Maybe World Tree isn't the best use of this square. Hey, Meow Laser, welcome back in. All right, Elden, you have a good night. Thanks for joining us. All right, I'll leave this there for now.
That it probably wouldn't have just sat idly by while this happened. It also makes sense that we find some sort of equally gigantic weapon lodged in the back of its neck, which we can suppose is what killed or at least immobilized it while its heart was ripped from its chest. But just what kind of being is large enough to wield such a gigantic weapon, slay a dragon of this size, and consume its heart? I think I figured it out, and may have solved a few other major mysteries along the way. Let's talk about it.
Elden Ring lore, Zaif the Scholar.
Zaif the Scholar here, and in order for this theory to make sense, we first have to do a bit of forensic cartography, reassembling the map into one that represents the lands between before the Land of Shadow was hidden away by America. And once we do so, we can make quite a few interesting observations about how the old map and the Land of Shadow's map fit together. Most relevant to our discussion here is that the Jagged Peak would have been located in northern Caelid.
And of course, a lot of people have arguments about this. I had told Zaif that I was going to check this out today. He said he wouldn't be able to make it, but he'll check out the VOD, and that he was, at the time of this video, he was taking it for granted that the center of the lands between correlated with the suppressing pillar, which is totally fine. But he still finds that theory to be compelling. Okay. If you could go back, you'd qualify it as being speculative. Well, that's what I'm here for.
And this makes a ton of sense if you think about it. Although it lacks Caelid's characteristic rot that was caused by Melania's clash with Radahn at the Battle of Aeonia, it shares the same red skies as Caelid, and is similarly populated by a sizable number of drakes. And this also means that the Colossal Dragon Corpse and Grand Altar of Dragon Communion in the Land of Shadow would have been located near Dragonbarrow and Greall, the mother of all dragons. It seems fair to assume that since Greall is no slouch in the size department, her mate was probably similarly large, and I feel like its size and location nearby in Caelid make this Colossal Dragon Corpse a solid candidate. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but what do you guys think? Could this corpse have been Greall's mate, or were the drakes fathered directly by Baal? But anyway, let's set that aside for a moment and get back to the question at hand. What could have been large enough to wield this weapon, kill a dragon of this size, and consume its heart? Well, the fact that he died in Caelid makes pinpointing the culprits a lot easier than you might think, as we can actually find the most likely suspects located right next to Greall in the base game. These absolutely massive humanoid remains. Now, these giant corpses scattered throughout Caelid have long been a mystery all their own. We find giants of a similar scale and appearance in the mountaintops of the giants, but we never knew why or even how the ones in Caelid got there, or indeed if they were even related to the ones up north at all. While making this video, I learned that the water in between Caelid and the mountaintops of the giants is spanned by an absolutely huge waterfall that would likely make the waters quite turbulent and crossing challenging, even for giants. And perhaps more importantly, we had no idea why the giants would even want to go southward into Caelid. But the item Borealis' Mist can perhaps provide us with some insight here. Its description states, "The ice dragons were once lords of the mountaintops long ago, until they were defeated by the fire giants and chased from the peak."
Yeah, if one were to make the argument that a giant killed the gigantic dragon by the Dragon Communion altar, then it would make sense to me that it could be related to Borealis' Mist because of the absolute size of the weapon embedded in the back of its head/neck.
So it's at least established by in-game text that the giants and the drakes had beef with one another, and that the giants chased the drakes from the northern mountaintops. And looking at our reconstructed map, pushing the drakes southward into Caelid would have been a lot more feasible, as there seems to have been a landmass that directly connected these northern and southern pieces of the continent together. We can thus posit that these now deceased giants entered into Caelid for a bit of drake hunting, and likely succeeded in bagging a really big one. I can only speculate here, but perhaps when Florisax and Placidusax gave the World Dragon Communion as a way of challenging Baal and his bloodline, humans weren't the only race they gave it to. You can check out this video in the card if you want to learn more about Baal, Placidusax, and Florisax, but to make a long story short, Placidusax wanted to see Baal and his bloodline of drakes wiped out, and created Dragon Communion as a way to make that happen. And when your targets include drakes of this size, enlisting equally large allies who also hated the drakes seems like a fairly reasonable thing to do. The enemies of my enemies are my friends, after all. So I think it makes sense that these massive giants killed this huge drake and consumed its heart, marking the first instance of Dragon Communion. At the very least, I think it makes more sense than the theory I've seen floating around that Egon somehow accomplished killing this thing. But drop a comment.
I never heard that one. That's kind of funny to me. Iman asks, what about the meteor arrow? We get its part as a weapon. Who would have used that? So if whoever made the ancient meteoric or greatsword arrowhead type thing was probably something as big as the super giant skeletons that we see around, because it's super massive. But maybe it could have just been a fire giant. But no, I mean, I don't think it would be a fire giant because the description does reference the old gods, whoever they were. So we really have no idea. It could have been the Rao. Then Scowlies, welcome back in. Your cat was sleeping on you and you couldn't get up to your computer. My condolences and welcome back. You didn't move, did you? Did the cat move first? Because if you move the cats, I will not forgive you. You broke the rule.
Comment if you have any thoughts, as I'm curious to know what you think. If this theory is right, these two massive corpses near Betrayal are a bit sad to consider. Perhaps after succeeding in killing her mate and eating his heart, these giants made their way to Dragon Barrow to take out another colossal drake. This time, however, they were bested by a Betrayal in her prime, acting out of revenge for her slain mate and in defense of Dragon Barrow and her children. I had always assumed that Betrayal was just decrepit from her old age, but perhaps she was actually injured in this conflict and immobilized, the perpetrators left dead by her side in plain sight this entire time. And circling back to Placidusax and Baal, our reassembled map can actually help us solve another interesting mystery. Where was Farum Azula before it was launched skyward? The evidence strongly indicates that it too was in Caelid. In Baal's arena at the summit of the Jagged Peak,
I don't know how fair that is. I mean, I think that looks kind of good like this. But what I would do first would be to try to unjigsaw the broken nature of Farum Azula. So maybe if you want to say that it was in a full circle at the top of the crater of the volcano, maybe. But I don't dislike this, but I just think it should work another way.
in Baal's arena at the summit of the Jagged Peak, we can find similar structures to those found in Placidusax's arena, albeit in a dilapidated state. Some people have speculated that this may have been Baal's attempt to recreate Placidusax's chamber out of some sort of pride. But I think it makes a lot more sense to assume that they were once part of the same place, and Baal's arena is actually what was left over when Farum Azula went skyward. Reddit user NoRecognition4464 and several others also seem to have come to a similar conclusion. But there's actually quite a bit more evidence that suggests Farum Azula was actually once in Caelid. For one thing, it's in Caelid that we find the Farum Great Bridge, which shares both a similar name and architectural motifs with Farum Azula. The Bestial Sanctum is also found just past this bridge, and it too shares interior and exterior architectural similarities with Farum Azula, which makes a lot of sense if they all used to be right next to one another.
Yeah, these are pretty well-known observations, and like you said, it's called the Farum Great Bridge, but the weirdest thing to me about Farum Azula, the actual place of Farum Azula, is that it's got like a lot of bridges that seem to connect to nothing, or well, they seem to connect to nothing that's still existing in the lands between. And I guess even now with the DLC, nothing there either, which is kind of annoying. So anyway, as next, nice to see you again. I definitely understand what it's like having to deal with the puppy zoomies, so no worries.
And this also explains why Greyall, Dragon Barrow, and the Grand Altar of Dragon Communion are all found here. Caelid was once the epicenter of dragon activity in the lands between. Although this does remind me of some questions I've had for a long time now. What connection does Malekith have with Farum Azula and the dragons? We of course find him as Garank in the Bestial Sanctum, and his boss fight is located in crumbling Farum Azula. Is he somehow tied to Placidusax and his fled god? Does he simply feel some sort of kinship with the Beastmen? He is at times referred to as a beast clergyman, but I wonder if the connection is that simple. Another question I have is what caused Farum Azula to get launched into the sky anyway? Did Placidusax do this as a result of being grievously wounded by Bael? Or did Bael somehow do this as part of his assault on Placidusax? Again, if you guys have any thoughts to add here, I'm really curious to know what you think. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. It really helps out the channel a lot, and I genuinely appreciate it. And hey, I'd also appreciate it if you considered supporting my work by becoming a patron, a YouTube member, or buying me a coffee. Thanks a ton for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey, so yeah, that was pretty fun. About the way that Farum Azula became launched into the sky, I think maybe this isn't the most commonly accepted theory, but because the Ruined Greatsword, or whatever it's called, talks about it gaining its powers because the ruins it came from was hit by a meteorite, that has led some to believe that Farum Azula was also hit by a meteorite, which is why it's floating in the sky the way that it is. And for what it's worth, after you fight Radahn and the meteor strikes Limgrave, there's a bunch of floating rocks that may be floating in a way that's similar to Farum Azula, so there is some room to support that theory as well. Others believe that it could just be part of the storm beyond time, that it's kind of taken it beyond the lands between. But yeah, we don't really know. Anyway, Chadwick, nice to see you again. Mosquitoes are the most deadly animals on the planet. Why'd you say that to Halo? Did he say something that I missed? Oh, it'd be like a fly killing him. I did miss that. Oh man, speaking about flies killing people, did you guys ever see that episode of the Powerpuff Girls where the kid who likes to eat glue ate a fly in his glue and then he transformed because the fly landed on some radioactive gunk beforehand? Yeah, that episode messed me up. It legitimately made me a germaphobe, and so just very disgusted by flies and insects touching food and stuff. Hey, Mr. Yada, nice to see you. Wait, no, you were here earlier, right? Yeah. You're the most deadly animal on the planet? Okay. Scallies, you saw that one? That one messed me up. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and like it. I've already gone ahead and shared Zafe's video in the chat with you guys if you want to give him some support. Why are my frames so bad right now? What the hell? Don't make no sense. Okay. Next, we have Storm King's Elden Ring lore, the original sin. So we've been talking about sinful stuff quite a bit recently, so I wanted to check this video out. A lot of early 2000s Cartoon Network did a number on a bunch of kids, yeah. That's not worse than the one Kid Next Door episode? Which one? I don't remember off the top of my head. Courage the Cowardly Dog? Because he was naughty. Courage was great. It was so messed up. It's kind of wild what flew back in the day. Scallies, you're glad gross out humor isn't as popular anymore? I couldn't really... Oh, did you say popular on purpose? I can't tell. The Pink Eye episode? Sounds vaguely familiar, but I guess that didn't bother me. Halo says the one where number 1 becomes an adult. I don't think I saw that one. Okay, anyway. Elden Ring lore, the original sin by the Storm King.
In Elden Ring, the Erd Tree is dying, or may already be dead, and the reason why is linked to the flawed nature of the Golden Order itself. This flaw is Marika's original sin, an act alluded to in the DLC, but one which is mostly left up to interpretation. Today's video will clarify the commonly misunderstood concepts of grace and immortality by investigating the nature of the Golden Order and the Rune of Death. We will also explore the life cycle of the Erd Tree and its relationship to the ever-mysterious Shadow Tree. These answers will provide the context we need to understand the original sin and how it has shaped the lands between, leaving them in ruins. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Hey, Moth Crab, it was Raid Night, and what is Gura? Gura is a VTuber. She just graduated / quit. Okay.
Marika! Oh, Marika. Marika. A curse upon thee.
Ask the next study you never got VTubers. You mean, what's the draw? I mean, in a way, aren't I technically a VTuber with my stupid Pepe Offnear avatar down here? Marika's Sin, Part 1, The Rune of Death. I'm a ping tuber? Okay, fair, very well. Scarleezy asks, can YouTubers edit the closed captions? Yes. You'd like to make sure that yours are correct, like it's the little touches, you know. So on my videos, what I do is I just have my script when I'm doing my dialogue stuff, and then I just revise as I record. So that way I can just take my script, put it into YouTube, and then I will tell it to do the audio captions based off of my script, and then it'll match up what I say roughly with my written stuff. So it's kind of the lazy way to do it rather than timing things manually and whatnot.
The Rune of Death goes by 2 names. The other is Destined Death, the forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation.
The Golden Order is a system with destined death removed, but it's important to understand what this actually means, because it's not as obvious as it seems at first. While it sounds like within this order, every being cannot die, this is clearly not the case, as the continent is filled with mountains of corpses and spirits roam freely. So, it's clear that things can die in the lands between, and that when they die, they stay dead. Or at least, stay dead for a long time. The concept of Erd Tree rebirth, which is depicted in the doors of all catacombs, shows that spirits are gradually absorbed by the Erd Tree to be reborn in its foliage.
Isn't it interesting how the Shadow Realm doesn't have those doors in their catacombs? Felt like that had to be a very deliberate choice.
As I will get to later, this process seems to take an extremely long time, and may not be functioning at all by the time our character explores the world. Even if it is, this is not the spirit returning to its own body, bringing it back to life, however, but returning to the Erd Tree, which births it as a new life form entirely. This can get confusing when you consider that resting at a grace seems to revive all the enemies in the surrounding area.
Bro, how do you have that many arrows in you? Like, you don't even talk about it. It's like the most natural thing in the world.
Confusing when you consider
My dude is a pincushion.
that resting at a grace
How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Holy crap.
seems to revive all the enemies in the surrounding area, but I'm fairly certain this is a gameplay element, not a feature of the lore. I'll explain why I came to this conclusion, but to do so, we first have to look at the two clear examples of actual immortality within the lore, those being the demigods and the tarnished.
Aspect of the Crucible porcupine?
In the overture of Elden Ring, Miyazaki was interviewed and responded to a question about the immortality of the tarnished, stating, "The immortality of the tarnished originates from the guidance of grace, and later, that guidance won't let the player character go." While most people assume that grace led to immortality, it seems more emphasis was placed on guidance here, which is unique to the tarnished. Erdtree nobility, like Kenneth Height,
You might have heard of me.
are also stated to have grace, but he's certainly not immortal in the sense that he can be killed and won't come back to life. Additionally, some large enemies and most bosses do not come back after being killed. So would this mean that things like Erdtree Sentinels do not have grace, but random dogs do? I highly doubt that. This becomes even more clear when we consider what grace actually is. We learn from the many runes we pick up in game that these items are the grace which dwells within the inhabitants of the lands between. So, grace is the runes we collect in game from every enemy and boss. We can also make the leap that if the great runes we collect from the demigods are full rings of the Elden Ring, that the runes we collect in game are a lesser form of the same thing, minuscule fragments of the Elden Ring itself. This is the reason why we can grant ourselves superhuman abilities through the use of runes. The Elden Ring is the rules of the world, and using its runes, we can change our very being.
Foul tarnished. In search of the Elden Ring.
The idea that grace comes from runes confirms that the ability to come back after death does not come from grace, but from guidance, because upon death we lose our runes, and therefore our grace. This is the same for every enemy in the game. If we are taking their grace, how would they come back? The only answer.
So, I definitely respect his attempts here. I just kind of don't think a lot of this works. It really has a tangible lore explanation for Elden Ring as well as many of the previous games. Because, like, the harder you dig into it, the more exceptions to the rule that you find, that it doesn't really seem as though there's a consistent way to track everything all together. So, if grace equals runes, then you would have to potentially accept that dead things like spirits have runes or grace as well, because they do have runes, at least like the blue ancestral follower dudes that you can kill in Shifa Rivers area, or the Banished Knight ghosts in Castle Sol, all that type of stuff. And in a way, I think you would have to accept that the dogs must have grace if you're going to argue that grace equals runes as well. So as to why certain enemies respawn and others don't, you might be able to make the argument that because the things that we kill are champions, they have enough renown / memory to be worthy of pressing them or hewing them into the Erdtree, to borrow a term. So once something gets hewn into the Erdtree, it might not be able to revive, I guess. I don't know, though. Halo says DS2 is the most consistent as we eventually everything stops respawning. You made them all go hollow. I guess I never thought about it that way, but that's kind of true. Unless you do the Covenant of Champions, in which case, there goes the lore. Shadwick said, BB is the only game that makes sense in terms of respawning the player in the world. A lot of that really depends on your interpretation about Bloodborne. If you go with the it's all a nightmare theory, then, or a bad dream theory, then yes, it could certainly make the most sense, because dreams implicitly don't make a ton of sense.
The answer is, they don't. The hollows in Agil ruins in Limgrave beg for the release of death in the dragon's flames.
Flame of Agil, burn true.
Why would they do this unless it was to end their suffering permanently? Additionally, if every being could return to life immediately after dying, those who live in death would not be special. The fact that they can come back to life after their body dies marks them as enemies of the Golden Order. The real reason enemies respawn is that the game wouldn't be fun or challenging if you only had to kill an enemy once and it stayed dead permanently. If you need a lore explanation for enemies coming back, you could imagine that when you rest, time passes and new guards, for example, replace the dead ones at their posts. In a later part of the Overture interview, Miyazaki is asked if Godwyn the Golden was the first of the demigods to die. Do the demigods not receive the immortality which grace provides? He responds, no, theirs is a different story entirely, a story that it isn't time to tell yet. But the demigods' immortality stems from them having their fated death removed from the Elden Ring. So grace doesn't seem to factor into the demigods' immortality at all. Instead,
And fated death is pretty clearly just a different way of referencing destined death. Halo interpreted the respawning enemies as being stuck in the law of regression stasis time loop. Sitting at grace moves only you through regression, everything else resets. I think that's probably one of the easier ways to reconcile that idea, but unfortunately that still doesn't explain why you can permanently kill Malekith or mini bosses which don't necessarily have great runes to steal. So, the Erdtree Sentinels, for example. Scalzi thinks that those who live in death's existence is outside the Golden Order, thus they're viewed as being unnatural and wrong. I think that's true, that's how they're viewed, but I think Goldmask and myself would agree that they cannot be out of the Order because the Order explicitly makes what's inner and outer, and thus if something exists, it has to exist within that paradigm there.
it likely gives them their immense power. Demigod bosses do form remembrances, which are essentially a large amount of runes in the form of a memory. This is where it gets interesting. We can understand that the demigods are immortal because their, and only their, destined deaths have been removed from the Elden Ring. This seems to be a unique occurrence to them, which sets Marika and the demigods apart. In-game, we see this. After defeating each demigod, they actually remain alive, but lose all of their power. And the reason is because we take their runes, and their great rune, upon their defeat. They cannot die as long as their destined death remains sealed, but they lose their strength when we take their grace. Godric, Renala, Morgott, Rykard, and Melania all remain alive in a weakened form after we defeat them. Once
Morgott does disappear eventually. And Radahn, he fully disappears.
the rune of death is unbound, however, the demigods can die, and we see Morgott pass away shortly after. You might be saying right now, but you just left out two demigods that don't come back after we kill them. What about Radahn
And Moog, I forgot.
and Moog? And to that I'd say, Radahn's soul and Moog's body were both spirited away to the land of shadow by Miquella to become his consort. It's pretty
But that doesn't explain what happened to Radahn's body. It's like his body is destroyed in a way.
cool to see that they planned this before the DLC was even announced. This is partially speculation, but I think that the fragment of the Rune of Death the Black Knives stole was Godwyn's, and only his, destined death.
Mr. Yada says Radahn's body was inside Alexander, and that is a popular theory, especially because of the red hair that you get in Alexander's innards and whatnot.
This is why if you use a black knife on the other demigods, they will still survive, at least until the entire Rune of Death is unbound with Malekith's defeat. So, with that explained, I need to go on a quick rant. There is nothing to suggest that the Tarnished canonically beat Malekith without getting hit once, or that they don't die a single time after the Rune of Death is unbound. The player's ability to come back comes from guidance, not the Rune of Death being sealed, and this guidance still persists after we release the Rune of Death. It's clear in game that being hit with the power of Destined Death simply saps your health and limits your max HP. In lore terms, it makes you die faster, but not permanently. Destined Death is powerful, and the reason Malekith is named the Death of the Demigods is because he wields their destined deaths, and is therefore the only one who can truly end their lives. I can totally understand why so many people have believed this one chance theory, but it would raise more questions within the lore than it would answer. This is not to say that the sealing of the Rune of Death does not have more general effects on the world other than the demigods, though. So now that we've covered the nature of grace, runes, and destined death, it's time to investigate how these concepts have shaped the lands between.
America's Sin, Part 2, The Age of the Erd Tree. Oh yeah, Scullies, you bring up an interesting point that Radahn's soul body must have stopped scarlet rotting if it's in Alexander. Or maybe it didn't stop rotting and that's why Alexander breaks after he fights us. Scalise said Malekith giving the player permadeath would be so lore-fulfilling but way too brutal to ever be allowed. Yeah, especially with the way that they had to walk back the dragon rot stuff in Sekiro. But yeah, just to run a little bit contrary to what Storm King was talking about a moment ago, you could also make the argument that there's nothing to suggest the Tarnished didn't one-shot Malekith for what it's worth.
Following the establishment of America's Golden Order, the Erd Tree flourished with abundance, and
Without Horns asks, do we see any living jars that are affected by scarlet rot? Not the living ones, but I think some have poison when they hit you. I guess I don't really remember them, to be honest.
blessings fell like tears. These holy tears are the Erd Tree's golden sap, and granted the people of the Erd Tree with immense power, vastly extended lifespans, and spiritual aptitude. This sap was likely captured in the basins all around Leyndell and spread to the faithful. The Erd Tree's favor talisman shows us that this sap was even bequeathed by Marika herself during this age. We see a depiction of this age on the icon Great Shield, which was painted with a divine scene, the recipients of a blessed tear from the Erd Tree. It is easy to understand why these blessed tears were valued so highly when you consider that in-game they allow us to restore our health and focus, grant us with a myriad of abilities, and strengthen our flasks. These blessings settled within the eyes of those granted them, gracing them with a golden hue, and so this gold became known as grace. As we established earlier, grace is runes, so the Erd Tree's sap therefore contains small vestiges of the Elden Ring's power. Since the Erd Tree is seemingly powered by Marika herself, who acts as the vessel for the Elden Ring, this makes sense. We've finally come to what effect sealing the Rune of Death actually has on the world outside of making the demigods immortal. If the Erd Tree's sap contains the power of the Elden Ring itself through grace, and the Rune of Death is sealed and excluded from the ring, this is likely why the Elden Ring's power gives such abundant blessings. These runes are likely imbued with the power of life itself, because the Elden Ring, which they originate from, has death removed. This is how so many characters in Elden Ring seem to have lived for hundreds or even thousands of years. While this was surely viewed as a blessing during the Age of Abundance, living forever has unintended and terrible consequences. There's a reason why enemies in the game look like this. It was thought that the blessed sap of the Erd Tree would drip from its boughs forever, but this Age of Plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time, the Erd Tree became more an object of faith. So, why did this age end? The Erd Tree Heal incantation implies that the Age of Plenty was doomed to end, stating that such is the course of all life. but I think there's more to it than that. Two talismans tell us that the Age of Plenty occurred during Godfrey's reign as Elden Lord, with the Amber Medallion stating, "The Erd Tree's old sap becomes amber, treasured as the most precious jewels in the Age of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord." The Lord's Bestowal Talisman depicts Godfrey receiving the blessed sap of the Erd Tree. The reason why it is important to establish that the Age of Plenty occurred during Godfrey's reign as Elden Lord is because we also know this was not an era of peace, but a time of conquest and war.
A crown is warranted with strength.
After all, at the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erd Tree. Godfrey led the war against the giants, faced the Storm King, likely a powerful hawk whose ashes we find near Stormvale, and had countless other unmentioned victories. Godfrey's armor states that when his last worthy enemy fell, it was then that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. This implies that the entirety of Lord Godfrey's time as Elden Lord, there was an ongoing war, or at least a threat to the Erd Tree. This is
And I think it is notable that that description does use the "it is said" here. And the reason why I think it's more notable in this instance than in many other cases is that what item tells us about it? What? How do I even do that? Okay. It's the Elden Lord set. The story is told that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. Maybe we should just look up Godfrey. Okay, yeah. Remembrance of Horaloo. When Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, was robbed of his grace, becoming tarnished, he took with him his kinfolk and left the lands between. So if that part of the description is listed with matter-of-fact language right there, that he was robbed of his grace, which made him become tarnished, then I think the Elden Lord set should be understood as just a story that people tell, because then there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. No, so it's just Toyu. Okay. Look at Godfrey's eyes. He's faded. Okay. Scully said, what about the Storm King being a horn scent? Like maybe a divine warrior or lion dancer. I think that's a possibility as well now, especially after the DLC. If so, we're told that the Banished Knights were former wings of the Stormlord, so then that would also imply that the Banished Knights must have worked for the horn scent, which maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't really see that working out too well, but I mean, if they were followers of Sirash and Sirash was affiliated with the horn scent somehow because he's kind of like a divine lion, then I could also see that working out in a way as well.
This is important because, as I established in my previous videos, the Erd Tree is a crucible tree which requires spiritual energy to grow. And what better source of powerful spirits is there than a period of endless conflict? It is no coincidence, then, that when the Golden Order became absolute and an era of peace was ushered in, that the Erd Tree stopped producing sap. A time of peace, especially one where citizens cannot die of natural causes due to the life-giving effects of grace, would mean that the Erd Tree lost its food source, and I believe this is what caused the end of the Age of Plenty. Because of this, America likely implemented the practice of Erd Tree burial at this time to absorb the souls of heroes with ample grace directly to the Erd Tree's roots. But since there was less champions born through conflict, it likely wasn't enough. Circling back to the Icon Great Shield, the only depiction of the Erd Tree we have from the Age of Plenty, it is obvious that the trunk of the tree is not the golden white we see in-game, but instead appears similar to the minor Erd trees, with brown bark. In its current form, the Erd Tree appears more akin to the small saplings we collect golden seeds from, which are described as illusory. The Erd Tree itself, similarly, is translucent when viewed from afar, becoming more corporeal the closer you get, although I admit this could very much be a rendering issue. Now, I'm not trying to say that the Erd Tree is an illusion, or does not exist. Instead, the true answer can be found by investigating the life cycle of the minor Erd Trees in-game. Golden seeds, which fell from the Erd Tree as a result of the shattering of the Elden Ring, grow into illusory golden saplings, a far cry from the towering and corporeal minor Erd Trees that grew from the same seeds. So what is the difference? Within the minor Erd Tree Church in Leyndell, we find an example of a transition point between the golden saplings and the minor Erd Trees. The trees have bark that is brown, like the minor Erd Trees and the Icon Great Shield, but still glow golden like the saplings. The answer to why they began this transition is found outside, within the giant jars. These jars, identical to those of the jar people such as Alexander, were used to transport bodies to the minor Erd Trees, allowing them to grow. This is the true purpose of the jar people, and the reason why we find such giant jars around almost every minor Erd Tree in the game. The trees must feed on the bodies and spirits to grow and become physical objects, and it is only in this state that sap is produced, proven by the crystal tears we find at each minor Erd Tree.
So I would disagree that the jars make them physical, because you can swing your weapon at the so-called illusory small minor Erd Tree sapling thingies, and your weapons will bounce off of them. They'll have like particle effects and all that. I also, although this isn't like super relevant to the video, but just to share some of my opinions here, I also don't believe the minor Erd Trees themselves are born from Erd Tree seeds. I think that these are much older than the Shattering and are much more ancient, based on the virtue of them having minor Erd Tree guardians, which have the same masks as the Flame Guardians, and we're told that they had an ancient pact with the Erd Tree. So if the Shattering happened in ancient times, that definitely sucks for however we interpret other ancient things in the lore. So I think it's a little bit more consistent to believe that ancient things happened way before the Shattering, but, you know, I could be wrong about that. So I tend to believe that the minor Erd Trees grew from the Erd Tree's roots rather than the golden seeds, which were only spread about after the Shattering. Scaleezy says maybe they feed on the gold within people. The minor Erd Trees and stuff? I think so. I think that's kind of like part of the whole root system that they have going on. I do have notes about the trees and the jars. I don't remember how complete they were, because I was trying to look up which trees did and did not have jars to see if there's any consistency with their appearance. I don't know. I have a lot of sunflower notes, but not the jar things. So they might just be in a different spot, and I just didn't make my notes super legible to future me. So I am suffering. Hey, I put 2 G's in ignore. That's cool. Moth Crab, you have to make an excuse to cook raw meat so you'll be listening while you cook? Ew, raw meat, that's gross.
We need only look at the aftermath of any major battle in the Shattering to see why these minor Erd Trees were able to grow so large. So, while the Erd Tree had brown bark, while it produced sap, as the wars ended and the bodies stopped falling, the Erd Tree reverted to a golden shadow, and the flow of sap ended.
Sorry, I realized I was not paying attention. I was just trying to read my notes. So I might not have labeled it all as jars. I may have labeled them as pots instead. No, I guess I just wasn't super thorough about that. I was more focused on the flowers. Okay, let me back this up.
Produced, proven by the crystal tears we find at each minor Erd tree. We need only look at the aftermath of any major battle in the Shattering to see why these minor Erd trees were able to grow so large. So, while the Erd tree had brown bark, while it produced sap, as the wars ended and the bodies stopped falling, the Erd tree reverted to a golden shadow, and the flow of sap ended. The Erd tree is still there, but as a golden shade of itself, eventually coming to be worshipped only as a symbol representing the Golden Order. As we enter the Land of Shadow, the first thing we see is the imposing shadow tree looming above. It contrasts the Erd tree. Instead of a towering symbol of order, standing straight and true, the shadow tree is a twisting, disordered mass of thorns and brambles, growing at an extreme angle. The Erd tree was thought to be eternal, whereas the shadow tree crumbles constantly from within, a reminder of its impermanence. The shadow tree is the shadow of the Erd tree, born of dark notions that bear no sense to order, that twist and bend its stalk, rendering it brittle. Because of this more sinister appearance, it can be easy to overlook a key detail. Unlike the Erd tree, the shadow tree still produces blessed golden sap. And it is not in any small quantity either. The blessings of the shadow tree can be found everywhere in the Land of Shadow. A splinter of the shadow tree that contains golden brilliance. It is said that when the shadow tree crumbles from its core, that it will scatter across the entire realm of shadow. The people of the Erd tree collect these splinters and use them in prayer. The importance of these tree blessings cannot be overstated. As we previously established, they formed the foundation of the Erd tree worship during the early days of the Golden Order. So why then does this twisted shadow of the Golden Erd tree produce the holy blessings it cannot? The truth can be found in the nature of the Land of Shadow, for this is a realm of death. We are told that in the beginning, with Marika's rise,
gold arose. And so too was Shadow born.
This might be the most important line in the entirety of Elden Ring lore. Gold and shadow simultaneously refers to the origin of the Erd tree and the shadow tree, the separation of the main area of the lands between, and the realm of shadow, and the creation of the Golden Order and the removal of the Rune of Death. These three dualities are all linked, not just by the common terminology of shadow, but conceptually as well. The inscription on top of the suppressing pillar states that all manner of death washes up here, but is suppressed. This pillar seems to date all the way back to the ancient dynasty, placing it long before Marika's rise, but the inscription may be more recent. The description of the Ghost Flame Breath incantation paints a clearer picture. The land of spirit graves is home to all manner of dead, and even the corpses of fallen dragons found their way there. The Helfin steeple, depicted in the sword of the same name, is very likely to be the Shadow Keep, and is said to guide the dead to the spirit world. Caro's hidden grave, an area named after the boatman of the dead, Charon, is home to the related Tibia mariners, and represents the red vitality of life, whereas the Cerulean coast represents the cold blue of the spirit.
So about the Shadowkeep representing Helfin Steeple, I could probably be more supportive of that idea if we had some indication of like the red, not glintstone thing at the top of it that is referenced in the description. But with the Shadowkeep not having anything like that, I feel like the Helfin Steeple is probably just a bit of a red herring as far as that's concerned.
Together they form purple, a color synonymous with shadow and death. Mikola
I'm going to count that as color theory. Hey, Elephant Steeple showed up. We got that. I think I should include World Tree at this point. Purples for gravity magic? Okay. Alright, here we go.
Had to die to gain entry into the Shadowlands, and is where Radahn's spirit ended up after his defeat. Of course, not everything here is dead. Far from it. Instead, I think it's clear that in creating a land of gold and abundance, Marika also had to turn the center of the lands between into a realm which embodies the concept of death. While the cycle of life and death was in balance through the Crucible before Marika's rise, her separation of these concepts broke the cycle. Any action leads to an equal and opposite reaction. In order for a land of plenty to exist, so too did a land of death need to come into being. So, to finally return to the Shadow Tree, despite being an embodiment of everything Marika disdained, disorder, shadow, and death, the reason its golden sap continues to pour, blessing the land of shadow, even when her Erd Tree could not, is because this land of the dead provides ample spiritual energy. This land's true nature might even be preventing spirits from returning to the Erd Tree. Instead of being absorbed, spirits instead are pulled into the land of shadow, fueling the Shadow Tree. This is our first clue into the nature of the original sin. Despite Marika's desire to be rid of death, it remains a holy aspect and should not have been sealed. We see divine light in the gold flecks within Malekith's black blade, and these attacks in fact do holy damage. The shadow sunflowers state,
He said doo-doo.
these flowers, veiled in shadow and covered in impenetrable thorns, are suffused with profound holiness, much akin to the Shadow Tree itself. Marika's order was contradictory from the beginning.
Marika's Sin, Part 3, Breaking the Cycle. And hey, Polyester Pimp, nice to see you again.
Now we have finally set the stage to answer the big question. What was the original sin? The sin itself is mentioned in two descriptions. Mesmer's Remembrance, which states that he was hidden away, keeping company with the original sin, and Miquella's Great Rune, which states that,
And so kindly Miquella would abandon everything. His golden flesh, his blinding strength, even his fate.
all in an effort to bury the original sin, to embrace the whole of it and be reborn as a new god. Although vague, we do learn some valuable information here. Firstly, the obvious connection that the original sin was committed in what is now the Land of Shadow. Second, and more important, we learn that Miquella abandoned his flesh and his fate in order to embrace and bury the original sin. The answer to why he would need to do this initially seems contradictory. Why would he have to renounce his Empyrean flesh and fate to become a god, when it is that fate which marked him as a candidate for godhood? Miquella's status as an Empyrean marked him as a candidate for godhood within the Golden Order, but after realizing the Order's failure, he planned to rise as the god of a new order, which would...
So that's the good old Miquella St. Trina reference that we needed. Ooh, so close but so far away.
bury the original sin. Radagon's Rings of Light do tell us that Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Melania's accursed rot. The manner in which Miquella renounces his fate is actually similar to Princess Rani, who used the Rune of Death to dispose of her Empyrean flesh and become the goddess of the Dark Moon instead of taking Marika's place. Miquella renounced his flesh at each of the crosses which mark his journey, and I believe he was able to do this without needing the Rune of Death as Rani did, due to the nature of the Shadowlands. The Rune of Death being sealed seems not to apply here.
Ever young Mikola saw things for what they were. He knew that his bloodline was tainted, his roots mired in madness. A tragedy if ever there was one. That he would feel compelled to renounce everything when the blame lay squarely with the mother.
So, we finally arrive at the answer. Mikola needed to renounce everything in order to rid the world of the original sin, especially his Empyrean flesh, because the sin is the Golden Order itself. An order founded on a contrivance, an order which broke the cycle of life and death, an order encapsulated by the Erd Tree, in that it was doomed to fail from the start. An order founded by Marika when she claimed the Elden Ring at the Divine Gate and reshaped the world into gold and shadow. This is what Count Ymir means when he says,
I fear that you have borne witness to the whole of it. The conceits, the hypocrisy of the world built upon the Erd Tree. The follies of men. Their bitter suffering. Is there no hope for redemption? The answer, sadly, is clear. There never was any hope. They were each of them defective, unhinged from the start. Marika herself, and the fingers that guided her.
the roots of the Golden Order are rotten because it is a system which requires death to function, all while sealing it away, cursing its followers with an unending life of suffering. Miyazaki's storytelling is recurring.
So there's a lot of small issues, not that I have with like the way that he's presenting the arguments. I think they're perfectly fine. These are just kind of more of issues with the lore in general. So if we could agree with one of the premises brought up toward the beginning of the video, that the Age of Plenty was contingent on there being enough death going around to continue to feed the sap of the Erd Tree and whatnot, then why would Marika's order that's built on death begin with her essentially removing death from the world? I don't think that works, which is part of the reason why I think it feels more likely to me that the Rune of Death was still somehow removed later, and the cutscene with the story trailer is just... I don't know, like, it just doesn't give us enough info. Like, we're told that gold and silver, or not gold and silver, but gold and shadow arose, but how does that mark the betrayal with Marika and the Hornsent and the original sin? So he hasn't brought this up in the video yet, which doesn't necessarily surprise me, because it doesn't, like, it almost feels like the DLC is talking about something different from the base game. But in the base game, we're told that the first cardinal sin is the burning of the Erd Tree. And so does Marika's original sin here predate the first cardinal sin? Maybe. But it seems to me that a lot of these things should probably be taken together, and I don't know how well it all truly does fit together. There's like a lot of small stuff that I want to touch on, but I feel like I would need to take the time to script out and make it more compact to lay out what's in my head clearly enough for it to be communicated well. So I don't think I could just do it off the top of my head, unfortunately. Otherwise I would. But I'm leaning more and more to the idea that when Marika became a god, or at the very least, at the outset of Marika's order, she may have burned a previous tree, whether you want to call that the Erd Tree or the Great Tree have at it. It would not surprise me if the Shadow Tree was the previous form of the Erd Tree, because, hey guys, it's the shadow of the Erd Tree. But the Erd Tree that we see now is kind of like a different form of the Shadow Tree, or like a different aspect of it, or something along those lines. But if that were true, I don't know if or what would have come before the Shadow Tree, but it seems like there should have been something. And I think a lot of this stuff ties in with Melina and the way that she is burned, and because Melina was burned, it seemed like she should have been burned later. So I wonder if at the start of Marika's reign, she created the Shadow Tree essentially, and then she came back and burned it later, which was the betrayal against the Horn Scent. And that's why the Shadow Tree says it was abandoned and all that stuff. Because I don't know. It's just weird. Without Horns wonders if FromSoft would ever put gender identity issues at the forefront of one of their games. That's not really here or there though. In a way they kind of did with Dark Souls too, because you could gender bend your character and not even know about it. So surely that's not the forefront, but maybe. I mean, like, Japan has Ranmo in half, so it could happen. Without Horn says the Helfin first, maybe? Whether it be the Helfin or the Candle Tree, or whether the Helfin be the Candle Tree, perhaps. Because we're also told of the prophecy of sin that goes with burning the Erd Tree as well. So I'm thinking that in order to create a new world tree, you have to burn the previous world tree. And so that might have happened once with Marika before, and then Marika later. But so I don't know, man. Like there's too much with Radagon and his involvement with the Shadow Tree for me to like not really see it there, or to just kind of ignore about it in the context of this video. And I'm not blaming Storm King for any of that. This is just a right mess that we've landed ourselves in trying to decipher Elden Ring and Shadow the Erdtree lore. Hey Jose Mora, welcome back. Nice to see you again. Could the Shadow Tree be some kind of snapshot of the past where a new tree strangled and ultimately replaced the previous one? So, in a way, perhaps. The way that I look at it is kind of what Crunchy outlined before the DLC came out. And I'm going to bring out our handy dandy paint program again. So, all right. Bam. This is your brain on drugs. This is the Erd Tree. Don't judge me. No, you can judge me. It's fine. This is the Shadow Tree. So I think that their roots are or potentially were connected at one point. How does America's thing you look? Anyway, this is the Shadow Tree. And so I think that their roots are connected essentially. And I guess you even have like some silver stuff coming out of this as well. Although that looks like a crazy angry storm cloud at this point. So anyway, that's the door. Why is this relevant, I guess? It's because I think when Godwin died and the rune of death got unleashed into the world, we got Deathblight, which I will symbolize with red, that infected the roots of the Erd Tree, and Marika shattered the Elden Ring so that way it didn't infiltrate the tree proper. So instead, what I think happened was our fish boy, this Jesus fish is Godwin. He got the death blight going into him, and so instead of being able to fully infiltrate the Erd Tree, it got shattered and removed. So Deathblight came all the way down into the land of shadow as well, which is why we still have those who live in death, which appear in the Shadowlands through its root structure, because I think the root structure was originally the same, and so perhaps the reason why the Shadow Tree is the way that it is because this could be a sealing tree trying to keep the sap from seeping out, so that way the Erd Tree itself remains eternal, but I don't really know. El Degusto says, what the hell even is that? Well, you should have been here. I explained it. Looks like an Erd mushroom. Well, fine. You want nice branches instead of my slow story? Whoops. There. It's more like a tree now. The Erd Tree root strangling the Shadow Tree in the realm of death idea? Maybe. So I think that whether or not you want to say it's the Erd Tree's roots strangling it, or the Shadow Tree's roots kind of keeping the Erd Tree sealed, like the proper Erd Tree, but it's still kind of fading away, maybe because of the shattering. There's a lot of ways that that idea can work, and part of the reason why I think this idea has some plausibility to it is because of the Battle Priest cookbook icon, which I'll pull up for you guys. I referenced it before, but hold on. A DLC. Damn it, none of these are labeled. Why did I do this to myself? Well, the good news is, as soon as I see cookbooks, then I'll know I'm on the right page. The bad news is I don't see my cookbooks. Is this it? Oh, I found it. Okay. So the reason why I think this theory might work is because of the Battle Priest cookbook right here, which shows a depiction of what's supposed to be the Erd Tree, because it does have like the Erd Tree symbol here. It's like the Erd Tree could be the top thing like we see over here, and then the roots might correlate to the Shadow Tree, although it doesn't visually work quite that way. But I think there's something else to this idea when you look at the door of the Erd Tree as well. Door. When you look at the door sigil itself, I think if we rotate this, it'll work out a little bit better. You kind of have the Erd Tree and like the roots coming at the bottom almost. But of course the Erd Tree looks a little bit upside down in this instance here. So, I don't know, like this kind of symbol always made me wonder what was going on, and then when I saw this, I was like, man, maybe that idea is true. And of course, if the Shadow Tree was disconnected from the Erd Tree ages ago, then trying to explain why there's Deathblight there is as fun as trying to explain why there's Deathblight in Farum Azula. You might be able to blame the Death Knights, but then why would they have like followed the cadaver surrogates into the Shadow Realm in the first place, unless there was a previous connection between the Erd Tree and the Shadow Realm's roots? So that kind of is what makes a lot of sense to me. Jose says, they aren't the same tree viewed through a different lens. That's kind of how you always interpreted the information we got. I'm not sure, to be honest. I I think this idea works. I could see another idea working as well. I just don't think we have a ton of information to truly be super confident about whatever we posit. Okay, let's go back into the rest of the video.
Cursive, and this is the conceptual evolution of the first sin in Dark Souls, in which Gwyn resisted the course of nature by linking the first flame and creating an endless cycle of undeath. This failure may not be entirely the fault of Marika, however.
Do you recall what I said? That Marika and the fingers that guided her were unsound from the start? Well, the truth lies deeper still. It is their mother who is damaged and unhinged. The fingers are but unripe children, victims in their own right. We all need a mother, do we not?
Meteor, the mother of fingers, is the true flaw in the system. She is the mother to all two fingers, including those which guided Marika to establish the Golden Order and plant the Erd Tree within the Crucible. We see a depiction of this in the Crimson Seed medallion found within the Finger Ruins, which states, "This age-old artifact also depicts the two fingers, perhaps hearkening back to the birth of the Erd Tree. Whatever the greater will is, the information Meteor and the two fingers received from it was incomplete, and the lands between suffered the consequences." There's so much more to say in relation to this theory, but this video is already getting too long, so I'll leave the related topics, such as Mesmer's curse, the truth behind Godwyn's death, and the reason Marika shattered the Elden Ring, for future videos. If you made it this far, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as it really helps the channel. Either way, I hope to see you next time, and as always, thanks for watching.
Alright, cool. That was enjoyable. Now, obviously, I do have some disagreements or differences of opinion here, but nonetheless, I think based off of the view that Marika became a god at the outset of her reign, I don't think there's anything too crazily unsubstantiated in the video by any means, and is pretty straightforward in that regard. So I went ahead and liked the video, and I shared it with you guys in the chat if you want to give Storm King some support. So, okay. Corin, welcome back into the stream, and next on the last
all the
video
bosses
for
in
tonight, we have Hawkshaw's Romina, the Betrayal, and the Beauty of Rot, Elden Ring DLC lore.
Ring's DLC. Of all the bosses in Elden Ring's DLC, Romina, Saint of the Bard, might feel like she has the greatest missed potential. After being teased in the story trailer, she is found near the end of our journey in a small remote... Of all the bosses in Elden...
Oops, I didn't mean to hit 0. Do you guys remember when everybody was wondering whether Romina was the Gloam-Eyed Queen? Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Reference her.
Hey guys, it's the Gek. Oh yeah, speaking of Gek, did we have anything else? Not Marika, Outer Gods? Nope, not entirely. Okay, I think we're clear. Wait, I have eyes and Melina Eye? Oh, maybe because of the Gloam Eye. I should probably remove one of these. Probably Melina Eye.
Being teased in the story trailer, she is found near the end of our journey in a small remote courtyard, where she has no cutscene, no dialogue, and only a few items reference her. The base game establishes...
I know Xionis gets really upset that none of the DLC bosses had a cutscene, sans Radahn. Verlana doesn't have one, Romina doesn't have one. Nobody gets one.
Rot as a...
Alright, Next, you have a good night. Thanks for joining us.
No dialogue, and only a few items reference her. The base game established Rot as a fascinating and complex topic within the world's lore, so it's only natural if you felt like there should have
Midra and Mesmer do, that's true. You got me.
Been more to Romina's story. However, though there were likely various plans for Romina that didn't make it into the final cut, such as her voice lines, there's actually a lot we can learn from Romina, from the true nature of Rot and its history, to understanding a core aspect of the Hornsent culture, something that is found even in the lands between, to insights into the raw civilization, and perhaps even that Romina actually betrayed the Horn Scent. Let's begin with the history of Romina and the Church of the Bud prior to Messmer's crusade. The Church of the Bud was not originally a place of rot worship. There was a time when these buds were not touched by the Scarlet Rot's blight, when they were the symbol of the small church deep in the ancient ruins of Raw. The bud is a separate phenomenon. The Oxford Dictionary describes a bud as a compact growth on a plant that develops into a leaf, flower, or shoot. Naturally, with the literal metaphors FromSoft likes to use in their games, and the importance of trees in the world of Elden Ring, a bud relates to more than just plant life. And we've seen this in the base game, where beyond plants, buds can refer to horns, and in some instances, even people.
The girl, Millicent, she is a bud.
Which relates in turn to the role of the world trees in the game as part of the complete
Got it. I already have it. Dang it.
cycle of life. So once, the church was unrelated to Scarlet Rot. If we look at the architecture, it becomes clear that the church is in fact of Horn Scent design. It has the same reliefs, brickwork, and detailing seen in various Horn Scent towns across the realm of Shadow.
Oh, he did say cut content? Oh, yeah, that's true. He did kind of bring that up. It was so light that you're right. He also said archaeology, but we already had that one.
As well as Ballarat and Anira Lim. From this, we can infer that the bud was important enough to the Horn Scent to construct a church devoted entirely to it. There is even a torch design in the Land of the Tower, which appears to depict some form of bud at the centre of a ship. But what is the bud, and why is it important to the Horn Scent? There are no further references to what a bud might be in the remnants of the Horn Scent civilization, but there is actually a society in the lands between from which we can learn the answer. A culture which rejects the Erd Tree and seeks to return to nature, reviving techniques that came before.
It does bother me so badly that they say they avoid the purview of the Erd Tree, and then we have these goons dancing by it.
Ancestral followers. The more you look, the clearer it becomes that the ancestral followers have based much of their culture on Horn Scent traditions. First and foremost is the focus on horns. Only the repeated sprouting of fresh horns can create a tangled horn, which is viewed as an irrefutable symbol of primacy. The ancestral followers believe that the horns of a long-lived beast continue to bud like antlers, over and over again, until the beast one day becomes an ancestral spirit. As if to emphasize the inspirations at play here, the ancestral follower horn talismans are simply lesser versions of the Horn Scent iterations. In addition, both cultures also look down upon those without them. The Horn Scent has a clear hierarchy surrounding the ability to grow horns, and are infamously harsh on peoples without them. In a similar fashion, the ancestral followers have weapons considered envoys' wings, made to reap the lives of beings which experience no sprouting. Similarly, while it might be a natural conclusion that horned creatures would be protected by both civilizations, it is actually the contrary. The deadliest of horned predators enjoy the sport of hunting and devouring other horned creatures. This is how the ancestral followers, who have not yet actually sprouted buds of their own, wear the horns of other creatures. The Horn Scent use horns to invoke divinity, which forms a central pillar to their civilization, around which much of their societal hierarchy is based. The ancestral followers believe horns beget the power of an ancestral spirit, through which can be found a new cycle of life and death beyond the power of the Erd Tree. In essence, horns serve as a medium for channeling the power of spirits. Tangled horns are a symbol of spirituality. We see this in action time and again in both cultures. The Horn Scent in their divine invocation, their ability to summon spirits, in tutelary deities, and beyond. The ancestral followers are versed in distinctive spiritual arts, use magic bows that excel with dwelling arrows, in which the spirits of small animals are thought to dwell, and their exceptional bowmanship enlivens the arrow with spiritual essence. Not to mention the display of power shown by the ancestral spirits, which hold power over the lives of the spirit animals around them. It grants them life, and in granting their death, it can absorb their power and nature, taking on new fighting styles.
I don't remember, does the first ancestral spirit fight not have any of the little dudes, or are the little dudes there but it just doesn't, they don't get absorbed?
All this is likely why the ancestral followers chant for new buds to sprout not just from their very flesh, but their souls too. The focus of buds and horns is spirituality, so it's only natural their belief would extend beyond the physical into the spiritual. And if there was any doubt as to the shared nature of plant buds and horn buds in Elden Ring, if you look closely at the body of an ancestral spirit, on their horns are growing leaves. So, buds.
It is interesting that those leaves aren't gold or anything, so perhaps what's going on with the Erd tree or the trees in a near limb might be somewhat different than what's going on with the ancestral spirits, but overall I would agree that there do seem to be some pretty strong thematic connections between those ideas. And then Potato Poker, welcome back into the stream.
Or horns relate to the divination of spirits. They serve as the medium through which the power of spirits can be unlocked. If we return to the Church of the Bud with this knowledge, it's only natural the Hornsent built such a church here. If the ancestral followers take after the Hornsent, then the Hornsent take after the ancient civilization of Roar in turn. Hornsent spirits are found all over the ruins here, and most are excavating the region in a large-scale research effort. These Hornsent academics have made records of the spiritual discoveries found in the ancient ruins, thought lost to antiquity, either in cookbooks or on these stone tablets, which have since been, for the most part, taken and stored in the specimen storehouse, after Messmer's Fire Knights refused their orders in a movement where they urged that the specimens be preserved. The Roar civilization's history is steeped in the power of spirits and horns. In an age-long past, before this land was enshrouded in shadow, the vitality of the Crucible flourished. Remains of this can be seen in the ancient ruins. Of all the realm of shadow that once thrived with the blessings of the Crucible, now the Roar ruins stand out as the strongest remnant of the bygone era, and this is still seen in the life that remains. An exceedingly rare to find calculus, suffused with spirituality, found only by hunting horned beasts in the ancient ruins of Roar. This, in addition to a beast horn suffused with spirituality, can be used to create a sprite stone, a lost technique of the Roar civilization. Sprite stones can be manipulated by bond stones, which reveal an interesting belief this ancient civilization had towards the spirits they made use of. Bonds with the sprites were made to be broken. All this is why the Hornsent built their church next to the ancient ruins. For Romina to have worked at the Church of the Bud, she must have been somewhat important in the Hornsent society, though it's unclear what her station was exactly. However, I believe she was a high-ranking member of the church, such that she had the knowledge or station to betray her people's trust, and aid in the destruction wrought by Messmer's crusade. One thing that always stood out to me is that there are only 3 required bosses
The Demon Soul song. I really liked the other one that was just playing a moment ago.
to beat the DLC. Messmer, whose kindling is needed to burn the sealing tree that enshrouds an Iralim in its divine gate. Promised consort Radahn, the culmination of the main quest, and Miquella's journey to godhood. And then there's Romina. Both the other bosses have 2 cutscenes and tons of lore throughout the Realm of Shadow in one way or another. Romina, on the other hand, has no cutscenes, no dialogue, and the only direct references are from gear made with her own remembrance. I'm sure Romina was at one point in development going to play a larger role, but what FromSoft has done with Romina is still very deliberate. Making Romina a required boss fight, where so many others are optional, is no accident, and I believe they are trying to tell us something here. So let's review what we know about the Saint of the Bud. Romina was there during Messmer's crusade. Once, in the crumbling, burning church, Romina held the Bud in speechless silence. A scene briefly shown in the story trailer, where you can see what is now her weapon, the pole blade of the Bud. After the church was burned to the ground, Romina discovered a twisted divine element, which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot. It was after the devastation of Messmer's crusade that Romina discovered and brought into being the rot seen in the present day. Otherwise, there is very little on Romina, not just before the crusade, but after as well.
So when he said that she brought in the rot scene in the present day, I'm a little bit curious if he means like the scarlet rot in general, or more specifically the scarlet rot that is currently present in the Rao ruins. I'm hopeful that it's the latter, but it is a little bit ambiguous there.
Recent giant scorpions are said to trace back to the Church of the Bud. At some point, Romina's body evolved, or infused, with inhuman biology, such that
So does anybody else have this problem that instead of saying giant scorpion, your mind jumps to rad scorpion first? Because I do. Oh yeah, speaking of rad scorpions, perhaps exciting leaks / news. There may be a legitimate remaking of Elder Scrolls Oblivion based off of some of the leaks. So I tend to not believe anything until it's like actually officially out. But if Skyrim, or not Skyrim, if Oblivion is getting remastered, I'm kind of excited in a way, I guess. Oblivion is the one that I enjoyed the most. I did not play Morrowind, but I will be sorely disappointed if we don't have the return of the acrobatics stat and everything. Halo, you're playing Fallout 4 right now? Nice. Uriel Septim dying in 4K. Bro, I really loved the Thieves Guild quests in Oblivion, and I was kind of disappointed with them in Skyrim. But I will give Skyrim the Assassin's Guild. You just killed the Deathclaw? I liked Fallout 4. I played only a tiny bit of Fallout 4 because I burned myself out of playing it by playing too much of Fallout 3 before it came out. The Oblivion remake will surely have acrobatics, but Sky Oblivion will not. Oh no. You're pretty much not interested in Sky Oblivion anymore with the remake announced. It sucks for them. I definitely heard that they probably knew that it was being remade, but went ahead with continuing Sky Oblivion anyway. But I also wasn't tracking that very much at all. Oblivion and the Rad Scorpions? Exactly. It's not announced yet, but it will be announced on the 21st. Okay. We'll see. Oblivion remake and the Sky Oblivion releasing close together will always be funny. Well, time will tell. All right. Let's go back into the Rad Scorpion video.
At some point, Romina's body evolved, or infused, with inhuman biology, such that she has the wings of a butterfly, floral motifs around her head and chest, and her body spirals into that of a scorpion and a centipede. She even has a wasp stinger hidden beneath. It makes you wonder.
Honestly, like, Romina is one of the most visually beautiful and kind of impressive bosses that I've seen them make, and I just feel so kind of disappointed at how much of a pushover she is. And keep in mind, I say this as somebody who played the game with 0 blessings.
If this relates to grafting, that would hint at some relation to the shamans, and might be where the title Saint came from.
Saint of the Bud. You know, let's look that up. I don't remember. It's probably not significant if I don't remember, because I've definitely looked at Romina's stuff. Okay, so it's like Holy Lady of the Bud. So Seijo, just Holy Lady, Saint. She still tanks frame rates on PS5? Oh no. Tooth Whip. The flesh of shamans were said to meld harmoniously with
Though that's only
others.
speculation, it does have some interesting implications as to Romina's origins. Alternatively, it is also very possible that it's simply the outer god of rot's power that manifests in this way through Romina, similar to how Mog can sprout wings from the influence of the formless mother. The abandoned pests found a mother in Romina, but she has not ordered them to do her bidding or spread her teachings, and instead they are all either close at hand or down in the valley below. There are members of the Forager Brood.
Bro, the pests are like super scary enemies, even in the DLC. I was like, oh, they're pink. I was like, oh god, they're still pests. They're rough. And the fact that they were so grouped together in the Bottomlands was pretty rough at times, I must admit.
All either close at hand or down in the valley below. There are members of the Forager Brood beyond her direct influence found throughout the realm, with ties to more, who lack the distinct pink-red coloration. In fact, Romina hasn't even moved from the church that once burned around her, and doesn't seem to have tried. It's as though she can't move away from this place, whether by duty or by guilt. Let's return to this scene in the story trailer, where Romina holds the bud in silence. This is definitely Romina, not just because the weapon is the same, but because it's her theme.
It is interesting that we don't have any visual signs of her being a horn scent here.
That plays during this segment.
one that could never be put to song.
About the music thing, I would like to take it a bit more seriously, but in the base game, Morgoth's theme was a Millennia's theme to begin with, and stuff like that gets shuffled around quite often. So maybe if we had some like legitimate Latin lyric translations to work with that could like substantiate this claim a bit more, I could be more in favor of it. But for me, this will just be rule of cool. Because I mean, this theme is really badass. Like the trailer was so hype.
The tyranny of Messmer's flame.
Isn't it strange Romina's theme is used for these teams rather than Messmer's theme? Bothgrab, you like the Bloodborne theme? I don't know, man. The main theme of Elden Ring goes pretty damn hard. But Ludwig is probably my favorite of them all. Hey Kyle, nice to see you again. Without Horns asked, do we know who's talking in the Shadow of the Erdtree trailer? It's most likely Leda, because they seem to have a personal relationship with Mikola, and it sounds like the exact same voice actress, so that's just kind of what I believe. Kyle doesn't think the Hornsent had Hornsent leaders. They might have had the shamans used as their leaders. You would assume Romina, Midra, and Marika all survived torture and became rulers. Yeah, that's also an interesting point about Midra not having horns if he was a Hornsent. So you potentially have Midra, Romina, and arguably Marika. Surely this choice means something.
Given she was part of the Hornsent Church, is it not strange how close the nearby soldiers are to Romina? Why does she not run? Perhaps she had simply given up, but to me she doesn't look afraid of the nearby soldiers. And similarly, the soldiers' calm, ruthless march looks uninterested in her. But I don't think this is because they haven't seen her. The purge of the Hornsent was incredibly thorough, nor is she at all hidden. The only way I could see Messmer's forces actually missing her is if this had been an unremarkable locale they swiftly passed through. But this was not a random location. This was the Church of the Bud, a place of worship for the Hornsent, a place which was most likely targeted, and which was even returned to later with the Sealing Tree. And yet, Romina, and only Romina, survives the crusade not by hiding or running, but simply kneeling within the church itself, in speechless silence. To me, her posture is not actually one of defeat or of someone who has given up, but one of sorrow, or even of remorse and guilt. And this betrayal is strongly hinted at by what happened next. The Sealing Tree obscures the tower in shadow. It cannot be burned without Messmer's kindling. At the end of Messmer's crusade, Aenir Elim and its divine gate was sealed away, much like the realm of shadow itself, such that none should be able to walk the path to godhood as Marika had done so many years earlier. The Sealing Tree is such an important structure, and yet it's Romina of all people who guards it, not a tree sentinel nor a fire knight, right to the present day. Romina is the one who defends the ever-important tree which obscures the tower. FromSoft chose to make her compulsory. They're trying to say something here, and I think the message is that there's a reason Romina is responsible for defending the Sealing Tree. A tree that was placed right next to her church, a church which she somehow survived the burning of despite her inactivity, and a location where Romina remained right to the present day without contest from Messmer's forces despite the proximity to the Sealing Tree. I believe Romina somehow betrayed the Hornsent during the crusade. I believe she survived right next to Messmer's soldiers because they were allies, not enemies. And I believe as part of this, she has been charged with the station of defending the Sealing Tree ever since. Now, hear me out, because this doesn't just explain the oddities in Romina's history, but this lens of betrayal, regret, and the death of her comrades explains how she discovered rot, and by it, found solace. Romina discovered a twisted divine element which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot, Perhaps then, the buds might find somewhere to gain purchase once more within the scorched remains. Famously, in the wake of the Crusade, Romina found new purpose in the resplendence of rot.
The cycle of decay and rebirth.
Rot is one of the divine elements of the outer gods, and eats away at life like a vicious plague. Where the buds
You know what? I'm gonna count rot as part of the Kagare thing. Oh, wait, or should I? Because that will be a bingo. I'll hold off. I'll hold off. So Moth Crab is saying her centipede and overall the colors of her model are so vividly gorgeous. I know, right? Now it's like, hey guys, this is what a FromSoft game looks like with color in it. Could you imagine a FromSoft game with real colors in it? I can't, but maybe I can now. Thanks, Nightbot.
buds of the church previously served to aid the Hornsent in their spiritual pursuits. The buds were now able to be repurposed to serve as a medium for the outer god of rot. In the base game,
Got it, finally. Okay, as I was hydrating because of Nightbot.
flowers and buds were commonly paired with rot, so it always felt strange that the Church of the Bud, which is now infested with rot, was once unrelated. How could the church seem to fit rot so well, and yet be totally separate, only coincidentally having rot weaved into it at a later date? Well, there's a reason Romina was able to find rot. Romina discovered a twisted divine element. Twisted means some form of bending, curling, or distortion, or some form of rotation around a stationary point. That's to say, Romina looked at what was a familiar divine element with a new, twisted angle and discovered rot. Similar phrasing is used when describing the revelations of the Blood Fiends, or the Lamenters. The Blood Fiends peered upon the corpse of their ancestor, normally an act of sanctity, and saw in its shadow a twisted deity. A deity they hadn't seen there before, but after the brutality of the Crusade, they discovered a new side to their familiar rituals. Similarly, the Lamenters were shunned for reaching conclusions that felt unnatural and foreign to the Hornsent. A stone mask twisted into an expression of rapturous grief. Romina discovered rot in the same place as her previous beliefs. She just approached with an altered mindset after betraying her people. Just as the Hornsent had found buds, horns, and spirituality within the raw civilization, so too did Romina discover rot here as well. Within the ruins there is a unique talisman, a discus made of verdigris, the corroded metal known for its heft. Verdigris is said to be the gift of an outer god. In our world, verdigris is a bright bluish-green incrustation or patina formed on copper or brass by atmospheric oxidation. Like how rust relates to iron, it's made by the rotting away of the metal. But something that I've really loved about the lore of Elden Ring's DLC is that it's demonstrated the positive qualities of rot more clearly. Rot is often seen as stagnation, since flowing water is the antithesis
Bingo! We did it, guys!
to rot, but this is not the case. Rot is the cycle of decay and rebirth.
Scaleezy, that's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard you say. If Romina is a woman, then how come she doesn't have any bare feet? She's literally got 100 of them. She's a centipede.
It is overflowing life with a high rate of turnover. It is life pushed to an extremity. But in the realm of shadow, it's been made clear that the result of such life is not always damaging. Those who dwell within poison know rot all too well, the death that begets life, that comes to all equally. That is to say, it is the cycle of rebirth put into practice. Rot is not death or stagnation, but a cycle of rebirth. It can definitely be argued that this is a crude cycle, and the wisdom of those who devote themselves to rot is certainly not something many share. Though men might recognize the keen intellect of the pests evidenced by the spear's uncanny design, it will never be understood by them. But rot can produce powerful and wonderful effects. The effects of the forager brood's pickled delights are enhanced by the fermentation, or rotting, of the ingredients. Not to mention, the friendly nature of Moor and the forager brood is something we never saw in the Kindred of Rot from the base game. Perhaps the relation to rot also explains the popularity of scorpion livers in the Hornsent cuisine, a delicacy known for its numbing toxins. And verdigris's incredible power arises from its corrosion, possessed of an enormously hefty yet supple strength, thanks to its rusted nature. verdigris, and of course the pickled livers, illustrate that rot can have a protective power too, caring for those both alive and dead. The shield will continue to protect its target even if its bearer should die. Similarly, verdigris magic is able to knock back enemies without causing significant harm. So how does verdigris relate to the ancient ruins?
So I was a little bit surprised he didn't bring this up earlier in the video. The whole aspect of
Civilization.
Where did Romina get the rot from? I think there was probably still that implicit connection from the scorpion spidery things beneath the area. And we were told that we did have scorpions in the realm of shadow in the before times, although they were much smaller. So I think Romina could have turned to some elements that were already pre-existing, rather than kind of finding something completely foreign and new there. Let me back that up.
Similarly, verdigris magic is able to knock back enemies without causing significant harm. So how does verdigris relate to the ancient ruins? The civilization of Raw deserves its own proper dive, but in brief, their culture can be boiled down into a few core themes. There's the strong association with the crucible and spirits, as we've looked at already. There's the focus on divine light, seen in the Sword of Light and the Invisible Walkway, the Miranda flowers, and the Sprite Stones. Not to mention the Spira of the Hornsent and the spiral symbolism which derive from their crucible worship. And then, there is also a theme of fire and water. Water flows throughout the ancient ruins, and the ruins in the lands between are commonly paired with water too, whether on the coast in Limgrave and Caelid, in underground water-filled caverns, as part of an aqueduct in the ruin-strewn precipice, or by the frozen river in the mountain tops. Similarly, the Raw civilization repeatedly relates to fire. Their culture was familiar with fire sprites and imbued them into Raw burrows. There are the Blackstone golems, powered by fire. The forges, which clearly relate to Raw in some manner through the golem smiths, who, like the Blackstone golems, can be rewired into attacking their allies with a crystal dart.
It is interesting to me that it isn't the darted golem that loses its mind, it's that all the other ones also get aggroed at it specifically.
The Raw at the very least relate to the giants as well, known for their power over flame. The Raw ruins are of a scale.
Oh no, man. Could the fire giant's lid thing be a verdigris as well? Oh no.
Relate to the giants as well, known for their power over flame. The Raw ruins are of a scale that suggests giant biology. The mother of all crucibles, found in the ruins where the crucible strongly manifests, is rumoured to have sprouted upon giants. The forge of the giants itself is placed upon Raw architecture and shares the same stone detailing. Not to mention, the last remaining fire giant makes use of, and is adorned with, what could be verdigris gear. All this is to say that the Raw civilization confidently wielded the power of flowing water and of fire. Fire and water may seem unrelated to each other, but I ask you, what do both of these techniques excel at staving off? You guessed it, scarlet rot. It was a swordmaster whose blade was patterned after flowing water, who famously sealed away rot itself, and later taught Melania to aid in her fight against the rot within. Similarly, scarlet rot is kept at bay with flame. The fire monks even managed to cure themselves of toxins by creating a fire within. And to tie the two together, there are the dancers of Renar, whose swords have the same dancing moveset as the flowing curved sword, offering a glimpse into the legend. They utilized burning oil in their flowing dances, which were revealed at the height of their passion with an explosion of searing flame. The dance of Renar is one of burning passion. The skills of Iji in the present day illustrates there yet remain some techniques against rot, likely passed down since the times of Raw.
His swords were all blunt as stone, but not one of them decayed when faced with the scarlet rot.
You know, I'd wondered for a while whether the reason Jaren said E.G. swords didn't decay when faced with the scarlet rot is because he's using the flamberge, and the flamberge itself kind of symbolizes fire. But if I recall correctly, E.G.'s troll hammer, whatever it's called, is actually imbued with fire, so that could be part of it as well.
Just in case it's not already clear, I think it's important
But it would be really cool if you got equipment from the Red Mains and it already had like fiery elements imbued into them, but they don't, which is kind of annoying.
to mention that Romina did not discover rot. Listen to these descriptions. The scarlet butterflies, bereft of a master, were soothed by Romina, who reached out to them. The kindred of rot are servants of the goddess of rot, but they are abandoned servants, and it is for this reason that they found a mother in the Saint of the Bud. Romina did not discover rot.
And it's for these kind of reasons why I wonder whether or not Romina came into contact with the rot and all this stuff after Mikola and Melania were already born, because the characterization of the kindred of rot and the butterflies make it seem as though Melania should have been around and rejected them, but that's arguable. I know some people think that the Crusade stuff would have happened beforehand, and thus Romina should have come into contact with the rot before Mikola and Melania were born, but I think there could have been a time gap where she was a sad girl for a while before encountering the rot proper.
But rediscovered it, picking up the broken pieces from a time long past, which fits the lore we know elsewhere. Scarlet Rot is an old legend. Mesmer's crusade took place well into the reign of Marika, as we've looked at in previous videos, and it's clear that the god of Rot existed in truly ancient times. This vast region is said to be the grave of civilizations that flourished before the Erd Tree. In the lightless depths lies the grave of an ancient civilization. The Claymen served as the priests in the ancient dynasty. There has likely been a number of ancient cultures throughout these subterranean regions, but their history well beyond the Erd Tree's age is clear. Furthermore, they share much of their architecture and even statues, including the clearly important unnamed man clutching a tablet, who is notably found at the Lake of Rot, flanking the entrance to the Grand Cloister. This structure was clearly once very important to Rot, not just by the environmental storytelling, or the pests praying to the statue at the end of the hall, but because this is where a ceremonial tool crafted from the relic of a sealed outer god can be found, the Scorpion Stinger. A great lake downstream of the Ainzel River, it is said that the divine essence of an outer god is sealed away in this land. According to myth, these butterflies were once the wings of the goddess of Rot herself. Once, the outer god of Rot was venerated by a powerful civilization, which followed a goddess of Rot as their leader. Famously, however, this god was sealed away by the blind swordsman, who many years later became Melania's teacher. O scarlet blossoms, flourish in distant lands and return to us, the unwanted children. The followers of Rot lost their leader and their purpose, and scattered across the land. Finally, the Japanese translation for Romina's
Hey, that's from my video. Hey, okay, credit last protagonist. Thanks, man. But we get another thing.
remembrance moves away from the concept of her weaving the rot into being, and instead describes her discovering a twisted holiness, and that she clung to the ominous scarlet rot in the hopes the bud would bloom in the burned church once again. Importantly, though the outer god of rot was sealed away, like all outer gods, their influence can never truly be removed from the world. The outer god being sealed is not evidence that Romina should have been unable to weave rot into her buds, evidenced best by how Melania is infested with rot. Whatever timeline you believe, Melania has to have been born after rot was sealed away. So if a demigod, the daughter of a true god, is unable to repel the influence of rot, then there can be no doubt that Romina could weave rot into being, despite the previous downfall of the rot civilization. So, the raw civilization excelled at fighting off rot, and it was in ancient times the god of rot was sealed away. And yet, I don't personally believe the raw civilization is responsible for rot's demise. Within the raw ruins are a number of statues, one of which depicts a female figure that must have been deeply venerated. Her statues are large and detailed, plentiful, and found in places that honor them. Even today, some Hornsent continue to worship her. But in front of one such statue are, curiously, a number of kindreds of rot, who pray to the statue in the same manner as the kindred in the Grand Cloister, where the god of rot was sealed away. The person depicted by the statue was clearly important within the Raw culture to the crucible shown by the Hornsent worship, and was likely of giant stature. But it is also clear that she was a symbol of veneration for those who served the goddess of rot. From this, I believe we can infer that the civilization of Raw didn't fight against the power of rot, but embraced it, with a control that hasn't been seen since.
So I wonder if Hawkshaw believes that the I don't remember the other one. The Ul and Rao dynasties were the same. Architecturally, they seem like they should be different, but I could see some connections between like the way that these kindred are praying to so-called Elden Jane, whereas the white kindred are praying to Elden John, but I don't know.
Through their mastery over flowing water and fire, they were able to tame the rot to not just be manageable, but
also, I know he brought it up, but I don't think I truly absorbed how he thought the Ral were connected to flames, because I remember the image that he showed was of the the furnace golem, and that's a Mesmer thing, and I think I was just distracted by the visuals and the spiral of it to see exactly how that was connected to Rao. So if any of you guys remember, would you let me know?
to harness its power to actually help people. Great weight makes for great strength, the strength to protect others. Whether rot was part of their civilization or a fellow faction is up for debate, since we see verdigris-like materials among the fire giants, in Farum Azula, and perhaps even on the weapon impaled on the enormous drake in the Land of Shadow. I'm keen to hear what your thoughts are in the comments, but I think we can at least be sure that Raw was involved with rot in a positive light. Through the Raw civilization, we can finally see the true potential of rot, not as...
And as for this, I don't know, I feel like because this part of the temple is closest to Romina, that's kind of the connection there, and this is all secondary, and this part of the temple kind of like spills on over into the part below right over here. So I think it's all just kind of like originally stemming from Romina and then seeping on down. The fire sprite stones. Okay, I could kind of see that.
As a scourge that brings only suffering and stagnation, but as something that can be kept in control and used to incredible, protective effect. Just like the pickled livers say, though rot results in a pungent odor, some come to find the aroma irresistible. One need only look deeper. The Hornsent never saw the potential of rot. They saw suffering and stagnation, rather than power or beauty, and as such, appear to have only studied the Raw civilization through the lens of the Crucible, looking at horns and spirituality. But the same buds they venerated could also be twisted to channel rot with their divine power, and this is what Romina finally saw after she had betrayed the Hornsent civilization.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if the Hornsent could look into the rot aspect of things if it was sealed away, but then again, if you want to make the argument that Romina somehow came into contact with the rot and figured it out, then the Hornsent could have too. I could kind of see that justification. With that, Horn said the connection they think was verdigris equals Rao. Verdigris has fire associations. Rao is fire-based? Question mark. He did kind of bring that up, so I guess I don't know. That feels really tenuous to me that verdigris equals fire-based, but fair enough. Halo said, if the Shadowlands are a dual mirror of the lands between, then it makes sense that it'd be controllable there. Controllable. So, outside, like, the Deathblight Catacomb, isn't there a river? Does that stop the spread of the rot further? I guess it is kind of curious that the rot doesn't completely consume the land like Caelid, but maybe it's not exacerbated by the Scarlet Ionia either. I guess I never really thought about that. It's not like the sky gets turned red here either, which is cool, I guess.
She looked at the same church, the same buds, and in them discovered a twisted divine element, which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot. Perhaps then, the buds might find somewhere to gain purchase once more, within the scorched remains. It's quite curious that rot was able to blossom out of the scorched remains, given fire usually keeps rot back. I wonder if the Hornsent actively disagreed with the rot within the raw culture, rather than only being ignorant of it. Romina's purification is the ash of war for her pole blade of the bud armament, a tool that preceded the crusade and thus the weaving of rot into the church. This ash of war floats the user into the air to slice through the area, unleashing 2 large sweeping slashes. This was once considered a sacred act of purification. Once implies that this was a sacred act from before the crusade, during the Hornsent rule. Purification means the removal of contaminants from something, which suggests there was some influence appearing in the church that was unwelcome. To me, the sweeping motion seems reminiscent of pruning or mowing.
I wonder if the bud was a horn like he was talking about earlier, because that kind of reminded me of the divine invocation of horns, or horn invocation, whatever they call it, that the horned warriors do. Obviously, it looks a bit different from the horns that they conjure, but yeah.
Like unwanted buds, perhaps? I only speculate here, but what if rot did have some means of manifesting in the church even before Romina, and the clergy had to periodically cleanse the area of it? Whatever the case may be, Romina inverted this act, where before the place was swept clean, she now imbues her bud blade with scarlet rot butterflies beforehand, actively spreading rot across the area. I believe rot in particular resonated with Romina after her betrayal. Rot is the cycle of rebirth put into practice. She found meaning in embracing the outer god of rot, and embracing that death begets life, perhaps to aid the guilt for her people's massacre. Life sprouts from death, as it does from birth. Such is the way of the living. In the culture the Hornsent already revered, she found an answer that allowed for death as part of its cycle, a belief that a high turnover of life can be a good thing, something we see in action during her boss fight, where in the second phase she brings to life hordes of butterflies, only to kill them in a chain explosion a moment later. She draws from both sides of the raw culture, an appreciation of rot, and the understanding that bonds are made to be broken. Romina extended kindness and welcomed those who had been abandoned, and Romina extended death too, for in death she could deliver peace and new beginnings. Her poison flower blooms twice technique epitomizes this belief, shortening the suffering of those who are blighted in exchange for much more damage. I wonder if her appearance today mirrors this duality of rot, of life and death. One part is a centipede, something which is seen only a handful of times elsewhere, and is typically paired with death. Most famously as the half-wheel wounds of the centipedes found on Rani and Godwyn from the Night of Black Knives, a mark called the curse mark of death. In Japanese culture, centipedes represent decay, rot, or impurity, which are all found within corpses. Could that mean the scorpion is a symbol of virility and of life? Between the two aspects, the centipede is the primary attacking force in the fight, delivering death, but it is the scorpion that delivers rot directly, the overact.
From my understanding, like, the scorpion is kind of similar to centipedes, and if I were to compare it to like anything in the West, it'd be the concept of like creepy crawlies, essentially. So insects being low to the ground and in like dark, dank places, or damp places, could be just harbingers of disease, ill fortune, especially if somebody were to get like poisoned, and that would make people fall ill. So that's part of it. Oh, damn it, where was I? Oh no. Okay, we were around here-ish, I think.
Corpses. Could that mean the scorpion is a symbol of virility and of life? Between the two aspects, the centipede is the primary attacking force in the fight, delivering death, but it is the scorpion that delivers rot directly, the overactive form of life. Perhaps this is how the native scorpions of the region grew to giant size since Romina embraced the rot, and how Starscourge Radahn is so large. I'm really glad that
I like that idea, except Radahn is large before Millennia fights him, and then we're also told that he studied gravity magic so he could still fit on his scrawny horse Leonard, so yeah. But I would agree that I think the reason the scorpions grew larger is because of the resurgence of rot there. Kyle thinks the reason that the scarlet rot could have bloomed endlessly in the lands between is because of Millennia's influence, whereas there is no Millennia in the Skidoo lands? Maybe. Chadwick said, a scorpion is about the only invertebrate that could feasibly fight a centipede, though would it win? Probably not a good combo. I know that there was this crazy Japanese YouTube channel that I saw ages and ages ago that would literally kind of have death matches between various types of insects. So you might be able to do some research and figure out whether or not that's true. But yeah, centipedes are overpowered in nature, Chadwick. So yeah, I've seen some pretty messed up stuff with centipedes, like, yeah.
the DLC presented the positive side of rot, as it's something that's reflected in our own world. Verdigris, for example, though it is a form of corrosion, serves as a protective outer layer to prevent the metal beneath from further harm. When life dies and rots, it creates a bed from which new life can flourish. There are tons of flora that require rotting to ensure the land is fertile enough to bloom. Just as in Elden Ring, those who are not equipped to deal with it can find rot dangerous, but those that have specifically adapted, usually insects and arachnids, or fungi and mushrooms, can live amidst rot, hence the visual themes in Elden Ring. And I think the comparisons made to Malenia help to emphasize the difference between these two characters, where one fought against the rot within her, while the other embraced it. FromSoft actively want us to make this comparison as well, I believe, as the soundtrack for Romina features Malenia's theme within it. And though this could be seen as just the theme of rot, the entire track goes quiet to give the Malenia reference center stage for a bit. These are separate instances of rot.
Look at that dude summoning in that previous fight.
And there's one other clear difference we've all noticed as well: the colour of rot. Malenia's hue is a strong red, where Romina's palette is much more pink. We've got a whole video on the importance of colour in Elden Ring you can check out, and here this would indicate that Romina's iteration is further from yellow. It is less chaotic and out of control. Instead, it's closer to purple and blue, closer to the bridge between worlds and to conscious thought. Life and death all together, but all in balance. Romina found purchase within rot as a means.
That is true. That is like actual legitimate color theory, but I've already got it. Thank you.
To redeem herself after betraying her kind. This is how she saw the wisdom of rot, and why she weaved it into being at the Church of the Bud. She provided a home for unwanted, abandoned children of the Outer God, and sought not power, but meaning in the death she had caused. She remained faithful to her commitment to guard the sealing tree right to the present day, seeking not redemption or honor, but to belong. Something that, though it was cut, I think Romina's dialogue would have depicted well.
Children of the tower, butterflies, take wing.
Children of the Tower. Bro. Man, that would have been cool to have.
If you made it this far, consider supporting.
I wonder if his pixel artist is the same one that did Sinclair Lore's pixel art. This is quite nice.
Supporting the channel and get early access to upcoming releases, feature your own theories on the channel, or even get access to new Lore Before Bed videos ad-free for less than $1. Your support makes content like this possible, so thank you.
Okay, cool. that was a pretty good video. I enjoyed that. I'm going to go ahead and link it for you guys here as per usual. And then I'm going to go ahead and leave it a like. So that was actually the last video that I had queued up for tonight. I guess I didn't have as much to say. Oh no, I guess I thought I had more time covered here. Yeah, this is definitely my fault. I usually have another 10 or 15 minutes queued up, but apparently I goofed. So, I'm actually thinking of just ending the stream a little bit early for tonight and then picking things up tomorrow. I have been in contact with Elden Dork. We might do a sort of collaboration thing sometime where we talk more about his ideas about how Radagon might be related to Velka. So I'll keep you guys posted depending on what we decide to do, and of course when our schedules align to do such a thing. So I have that coming up on the horizon. I'm almost completely done with Kazan, so I think maybe after I beat the game, I might play that on stream. I also did get, what's it called? Legend of Nostalgia, the kind of trippy Souls game, which is supposed to be funny, and I might play that. I also have Salt and Sanctuary, so we've got a bunch of things to potentially check out. Simon Saint of You, welcome into the stream. You're not sure if you mentioned it before, but Romina's soundtrack tells your story. Her phase 1 plays in the trailer showing the horror of the crusade. It's in the minor key and descending. Her phase 2 is a major key and upbeat. No, so that was not mentioned even in the context of the video, so that's kind of nice. So if you're really into music, I know Crunchy is as well. He did do a stream once analyzing the music of some FromSoft tracks, but I didn't watch it. I thought about reacting to it, but then, I don't know, just didn't seem like the most transformative thing I could do. But yeah, I appreciate that comment. Very interesting. Thanks, Corn. Appreciate that. You'd love to see me stream Kazan. Yeah, so if I do play Kazan, I'm thinking of potentially going through with a different weapon, because I've gone through the majority, well, pretty much the entirety of the game at this point, only using the dual wield, which is really fun. I've quite enjoyed it. So I'm thinking of potentially doing the greatsword, although I was wondering of potentially doing the spear, because the spears might be underrepresented, but I was thinking of the greatsword. New Game Plus is definitely worth it too. Yeah, I don't know what New Game Plus has to offer. I would kind of almost feel like, unless I can't access things differently with a brand new game, that I would avoid doing New Game Plus, so that way I could experience the power curve all over again without having all the skills available and stuff, because there's kind of enjoyment in leveling up that way for me. Corn said, YouTube, dual wield for life. It's quite nice. So I imagine that the greatsword and the spear have some really good things going for it as well. Greatsword's clearly the best. I think a lot of it really depends on the sets that you get, because some set bonuses are ridiculously strong. Like pretty late in the game, the dual wields get access to, what's his name? Damn it, I can't think of it. Like the coffin guy. He has a really crazy set for buffing the dual wields light attacks, which is actually really good, surprisingly. Yeah, Bloodthirsty Fiend set from Scalpel. Thank you. Greatsword is definitively the best weapon. I could see that, especially fighting certain bosses, but I think some of it could also just go down to strategy. But anyway, thank you guys for joining. As always, we'll be picking things up again at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. Until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.